The views and opinions expressed on this podcast is solely of the creator and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the listener. Listener discretion is advised. Also, ChatGPT and AI bots were not used or harmed in the creation of this podcast. It's 24 hours until the almost super full moon. Under the growing moonlight with Pluto, Saturn, and Neptune in retrograde, are you feeling your spiritual connection deepen? If so, you're not alone. If you're feeling like you're clearing out old family patterns and binds, or it's the warm-up to a second upcoming of super full moons, or maybe a great life cycle is about to complete and release. Guess what, guys? It's another full moon here in Ohio. So, on my way back from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, along US 35 is Chillicothe, Ohio, in Ross County, Ohio's very first capital. Chillicothe is a city in the county seat of Ross County, Ohio, United States. Located along the Scioto River, 45 miles south of Columbus, Chillicothe was the first and third capital of Ohio. It is the only city in Ross County that is in the center of the Chillicothe micropolitan area. So it's not a metropolitan, it's a micro, so it's not as big as it could be like Columbus. Alright, so a little history about Chillicothe. The region around Chillicothe was the center of the ancient Hopewell tradition, which flourished from 200 BC until 500 AD. This culture had made trade routes extending to the Rocky Mountains. They built earthen mounds for ceremonial and burial purposes throughout the Scioto and Ohio valleys. Later, Native Americans who inhabited the area through the time of European contact included the Shawnees. Present-day Chillicothe is the most recent of 7 locations in Ohio that bore the name because it was applied to the main town wherever the Chacalathea settled. I don't know how to pronounce these Native American names that well, so bear with me, people. I'm trying my best. Okay, so right in the center of Ohio, you have Chillicothe. Before Ohio was officially settled, it was called Ohio County. In the early 1800s, indigenous natives lived here. Ohio has a lot of amazing indigenous stories and people. Ohio has a lot of mounds and sacred places. The mounds and mysteries of ancient Ohio. So Ohio has quite a bit of mounds in it. But we're going to talk about the Hopewell Mound City Group. So the Hopewell Mound City Group is in Chillicothe, just outside the city. The mounds was built by the Hopewell culture a few thousand years ago. And in fact, Mound City contains the largest concentration of mounds of any Hopewell settlement, totaling 24 mounds in one area. The group of mounds takes up an area that's 13 acres, and it was all surrounded by elevated barrier. But the barrier was unlikely meant for defense, so what's the true purpose of the site? Mound City was likely a sacred space used for sacred rituals and burials, probably the changing of the seasons and the harvest. Supposedly each mound had its own accompanying structure. Archaeologists believe that these buildings would have been used for cremation ceremonies before placing the ashes within the mound. Ashes and bone remnants, in fact, have been found in the very center of many of the mounds, close to ground level, and when the mounds were first excavated in the 19th century, archaeologists also found various effigies, stone tools, copper artwork, and obsidian spear tips. Notably, materials found within the mounds came from as far away as the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic coast, and the Rocky Mountains in Canada. That means that the Chillicothe area, now a sleepy town of 20,000, was once the heart of a vast trading network. Let's talk a little bit about the Hopewell people real quick. The Hopewell culture thrived throughout the Midwestern U.S. from around 1 to 500 AD. The term, however, is merely a broad label for various Native American tribes that shared cultural traits. So they were all like in this place where it's like a crossroads of all these different indigenous cultures trading things, barter and trade. It's like the way the world actually should be now, in my own opinion. There was unlikely a unified group that called themselves by a single name. And if they had, it certainly wouldn't have been Hopewell. In fact, derivatives from the Mordecai Hopewell, I think that's more Mordecai. Yeah, Mordecai Hopewell. Okay. He was the man who owned the land on which the Mound City was discovered. So a white man named, of course it was a white man that named all this. This is awful. Of course. We know little about the Hopewell culture overall. Of course, we know very little because we ran them out. But we do know that in addition to being skilled artisans, the Hopewell had very sophisticated knowledge of astronomy and geometry. This is not only evidenced by the sites like Mound City, but it's also mind-blowing network like earthworks complexes, and you'll learn more about, on this website that I'm going to include in the link, okay? It's going to talk about every single mound in Ohio, including the Serpent Mound, which should be open on the summer solstice. Graham Hancock sent me to say that. Okay, so speaking of the indigenous people that were living in Ohio at the time, we have to talk about Tecumseh. Tecumseh is a very well-known Native American that lived in this area while he was alive. Alright, Tecumseh, a Shawnee chief, opposed white settlement in the United States during the early 1800s, and he was killed during the War of 1812. So first, we're going to have a poem that we're going to play for you right now. It's called So Live Your Life by Chief Tecumseh, and we'll also include this in the links down below.
So, live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Trouble no one for their religion. Respect others in their view, and demand that they respect yours too. Love your life, perfect your life, beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long and its purpose in the service of your people. Prepare a noble death song for the day when you pass over the great divide. Always give a word or a sign of salute when meeting or passing a friend, even a stranger, when in a lonely place. Show respect to all people and grovel to none. When you arise in the morning, give thanks for food and the joy of living. If you see no reason to give thanks, the blame lies only on yourself. Abuse no one and no thing, for abuse turns the wise into fools and robs the spirit of its vision. When it comes your time to die, be not like those whose hearts are filled with the fear of death, so that when their time comes, they weep and pray for a little more time to live their lives over again in a different way. Sing your death song and die like a hero going home.
So that was a poem, I guess, dedicated to Tecumseh, or written, or legend has it that Tecumseh actually stated all this, but from what I can tell, it was just something that, they took and made for Tecumseh when he died. So, we're going to talk about the Adena Mansion next, only because Tecumseh and the first governor of Ohio had a little, almost a falling out. It's not good what happened to Tecumseh. And if you'd like to see more info about Tecumseh, they have a beautiful outdoor drama in Chillicothe. It's wonderfully done, beautifully done. The acting is amazing, and it tells the story of Tecumseh very well. So, the Adena Mansion. Adena was the 2,000-acre estate of Thomas Worthington, 1773 to 1827, 6th governor of Ohio and one of the state's first United States senators. The mansion house, completed in 1806, has been restored to look much like it did in the Worthington family lived there, including many original family furnishings. Okay. Back to Tecumseh and Mr. Thomas Worthington. Adena, the historic Worthington home, is located on the commanding range of the hills west of Chillicothe. It looks across the Mount Logan, from which the face of the Great Seal of Ohio was designed. It overlooks the Scioto Valley, a terrain favored alike by the mound builders, the Indians, and ourselves. The story of this banquet harks back to the time of Tecumseh and his brother, the prophet. The presence of large numbers of Indians drawn by the prophet's mission to Greenville in 1807 caused increasing alarm among the Ohio settlers in the central and western parts of the state. After mobilizing several companies of the Ohio militia organized under the Ordinance of 1784, Governor Kilkner dispatched General Thomas Worthington and General Duncan MacArthur to Greenville. People from Greenfield, Ohio will know what Duncan MacArthur means. They bore that peace message to the Indians and were instructed to obtain from Tecumseh and the prophet the status of their activity here. And its purposes of the commissioners left Chillicothe and then the capital of Ohio in September of 1807 and arrived at Greenville on September 16th of that same year. They were cordially received and treated during their visit and invited to attend a large Indian council about to be held at the settlement. On their journey return, they were accompanied by an Indian commission of 4, Tecumseh, Blue Jacket, Roundhead, and the Panther, with Stephen Ruddle as the interpreter. They had been appointed by the council at Greenville to wait on the governor and assure him of the peaceful purposes of the prophet's mission. The report submitted to the Governor Kirkner by his commissions was entirely favorable to the prophet's cause. They found no evidence that it was a covert war movement. A few days after they arrived at Chillicothe, a record-breaking mass meeting was held. It was addressed by Tecumseh and presided over by Governor Kirker. The address was able, magnetic, and convincing. The pioneer unrest and fear of Indian hostilities was set at rest as well. Tecumseh's assurances that his people desired to live in peace with their white brothers were accepted. To that end, the prophet's mission work, a labor of love, was teaching better moral preparation and better understanding of the new conditions that confronted his race after the Treaty of Greenville. The magnetic oratory of the great Indian patriot won. Hundreds of men who listened with close attention to the historic address departed to their homes, relieved of their fears that another Indian war was impending. Governor Kirker discharged the militia, and he mobilized as a precautionary measure. Hospitable entertainment was shown the Indian commissioners on all sides during their short stay. General and Mrs. Worthington, who had opened their doors of Edina to Tecumseh and his associates, gave a reception in their honor on the eve of their departure for Greenville. The banquet, after the fashion of that day, was elaborate and bountiful, and it was the age of the pyramid table. In the serving of coffee, one of the chiefs overlooked. From the Indian viewpoint, such an individual admission is a friendly feast opened a line of field for Indian banter of the coffeeless chief by the other Indians. The custom is explained in Alford's notes on the Shawnee that the situation naturally grew tense to the other guest, who could have no knowledge of the coffeeless chief. Tecumseh quickly exercised his good offices, to the great relief of his hostess' embarrassment. The neglected chief was served gospel measures of coffee, poured over by her own hands, and was honored for the remaining hours of reception for her personal attention. So my thoughts on this is the Indians didn't like the white folk. The white folk came in and messed with their big trading area in Ohio. So it's not fair. Tecumseh eventually died in the War of 1812. If you want to read more about Tecumseh, I will have a link for the Edina Mansion in the show notes. Alright, so we're going to talk a little bit more about the Edina Mansion just for a second. It is the homestead of Thomas Worthington, his wife, and their 10 children, who are all said to haunt the mansion to this day. Some reports claim that the governor still sits in his chair, and the chair moves on its own. His wife roams the hallways and is seen in the gardens. If you would like to take a tour of the Edina Mansion and Gardens, please visit their website for more on the dates and pricings of the tours. Which brings me to our next segment, Luna's Clout Corner. Alright, so we're going to do a new segment on our show called Luna's Clout Corner. I'm here with my dog Luna. Say hi, Luna. Yeah. And she's got a spooktacular product that she wants to talk about today. It's called True Vision, or Truvy, Truvy. And I have an awesome representative that's an old friend of mine that represents the company in such a beautiful way. So in her own words, I asked her to describe why she likes this company, and this is what she had to say. What I love about this company is how absolutely genuine the owners are. I have been on a first-name basis with Derek Rains since 2017. I have spoken directly to our product formulator, David Brown, multiple times. Never in a history of a multi-million global company can a peon P-E-O-N, like me, say that. They work diligently to keep our products a high quality with low price points because everyone deserves the ability to be healthy regardless of their financial situation. You can begin earning commissions with this company before you even make your first purchase, and it's entirely free to start. Yes, we are known for weight loss, but the weight loss is just a happy side effect of the healthy lifestyle that these products encourage. They literally retain your brain from the inside out to crave fruits, vegetables, lean meats, and water. By feeding your body the nutrients it needs, everything else just falls into place. I've had multiple customers over the last 6 years that have found themselves pregnant after battling infertility, that have gone off their prescription meds for diabetes, blood pressure, and anxiety. 1 or 2 customers seeing progress like this can be a coincidence, but multiple customers from all the same general area. That is an insane coincidence. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like, all these people are like just being healthier because of this product. I'm not a doctor, so take it with a grain of salt, but I absolutely attribute these monumental changes to the healthy lifestyle these products have encouraged and made attainable. Now, if you want to follow my friend and check out her amazing products, go to truvi.com/truebossmom. We'll also have that link in the show's description. So thank you for being my first test subject on Luna's Clout Corner. Yeah, Luna's not too talkative today, so she must be okay with that product. What do you think, Luna? Luna, what do you think? Good product? She has no opinion. Alright, now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to Legends Of. Today we will be taking a look at a legend of Ohio, the moving gravestone of Chillicothe. In Chillicothe, Ohio, well off the main roads, sits a long forgotten cemetery. Most people who visit this cemetery only visit it because of the legend of Elizabeth's grave. Not much is known about Elizabeth, but according to legend she hung herself from a tree in the very cemetery she is now buried in. It is unknown why she hung herself, or why in this very cemetery. But if you believe the legends, although she is now dead, she is not at rest. Many years ago, Elizabeth's headstone became damaged, part of it disconnecting from the base. And although she was buried near the front of the cemetery, groundskeepers and visitors alike to the cemetery often find her headstone in the back of the cemetery, near the tree it's reported she died at. No matter how often her grave is moved to its rightful spot, it always ends up moved back to the tree. Some people have also reported seeing the ghostly figure of a woman walking the graves. Many think that this ghostly woman is Elizabeth. While we don't know what happened to Elizabeth, if you believe the legends, she has been very busy in death.
We've all experienced.
Alright, so we're going to talk about Elizabeth's grave. Off an old dirt road out of Union Lane outside of Chillicothe is Mount Union Pleasant Valley Cemetery. Mount Union's claim to fame is that it is the final resting place of Elizabeth, and possibly where she had died as well. There are 2 major stories on the Elizabeth legend. In the first, Elizabeth is overcome with grief over the death of her husband and hangs herself from the tree near the cemetery in which her husband was buried. In another variation of the story, Elizabeth was murdered because she inherited money from her dead husband. So the other men of the town in this Mount Union hung Elizabeth from the tree that's in the cemetery. Okay, so there's two stories. So that's up to you to decide on how she died. In both legends, the story goes that Elizabeth was buried near the front of the cemetery. However, her tombstone mysteriously moves itself to the back of the cemetery near the location of her death by the tree. Most often against that very tree she's hung from. When replaced, it would always wander back to the near of the tree. The cemetery is in really bad conditions the last time I went anyway, and from what I've been reading, it's even worse from when I went there. All the headstones are pretty much gone and placed in this big pile just right outside in the woods. There is, let me see. I know I have it on here somewhere. Yeah, there are 13 Elizabeths buried here at the Mount Union Cemetery. Elizabeth Clark is the only one, according to record, is the infamous Elizabeth. The other one is too old to be Elizabeth, that most people think is her grave, that you see the Elizabeth Eagleson. That I saw that headstone myself. I don't think it's her. According to record, yeah, the Elizabeth Clark's headstone should be the right one. For more information on Elizabeth's grave, you can visit my website under themoonparanormal.weebly.com. And the first thing you notice about the pictures that I took is that ginormous tree. There used to be a cemetery off to the left of that tree. So, talking about interesting headstones from one to another, we are talking about South Salem, Ohio right now. Some British royalty that rest in the South Salem Cemetery was Mary A. Morter, the half-sister of Queen Victoria. Mary Morter, birth date March 12, 1818, London, Greater London, England. Death date April 16, 1852, South Salem, Ross County, Ohio. The stone at the grave of Queen Victoria's half-sister reads, Mary A. Morter, W/O B.J. Morter, a native of England, died April 16, 1852, aged 34 years, 1 month, 4 days. She was D/O George, Duke of Kent, and father of Queen Victoria. The final resting place for many veterans. Veterans wore 9 wars, in fact, many oldest burials. Few have large, heavy slabs over them in the cemetery. This was to protect the graves from coyotes, I guess. This is considered to be one of the more historic graveyards in Ohio because of Mary Morter. From Kingston's Palace in London, England, was a small frame house in the hamlet in the Ohio Southland, reflected quite a remarkable contrast in lifestyles. But one was that born with dignity and grace by an older half-sister of Queen Victoria. Her name was Mary, the daughter of the Duke of Kent and the granddaughter of King George III, during whose reign was American colonists revolted and successfully fought for their independence. Following the death of King George III in 1820, his eldest son, George IV, succeeded to the throne and reigned as king for only about 10 short years before his death in 1830, leaving no heirs. The throne passed to his younger brother, William IV, who then occupied the throne even less time, dying in 1837. He too had no heirs, and the crown was then passed to the family of the next youngest brother, Edward, who died in 1820. Dang. Edward had been twice married by his first wife and had fathered Mary. By all rights, upon the death of her uncle, King William IV, Mary would have ascended to the throne, becoming Queen of the United Kingdom and the Great Britain of Ireland and the Empress of India. But alas, Mary, who was born in March of 1818, had committed the unforgivable sin of European royalty. She married a commoner. and because she had joined the holy wedlock to one not of royal bloodlines, by the time her uncle's death in 1837, she had already been disinherited and shunned by her royal relatives. And thus it occurred that the right to the throne had fell to her younger sister Victoria, who had been born less than 2 years after Mary to Edward and his second wife, Victoria Maria Louisa, a sister of the King Leopold of Belgium. Queen Victoria's reign from 1837 until her death in 1901. It was the longest British history and chiefly remembered as one of the most peaceful in prosperity. But this story is not about Victoria, but her older sister, Mary, who followed her heart to a life of hard work and privation, living her last days in a small town thousands of miles and an ocean away from her native land, where she could have led much pampered and luxurious existence. Although she was highly educated and primed for the role of queen, young Mary fell in love with Blythe Jaguar Mortar, the stonemason by trade. Details of their love story are now lost to memory, but it can be presumed that the couple met when Mortar was employed to work on the palace grounds where Mary had lived. Blue bloods love secluded lives, so it's hard to imagine how else Mary could have gotten to know a day laborer so well to fall in love with him. Despite the chance she might someday fall heir to the throne, her love for B.J. Mortar overcame any desires she may have harbored for power and fame. When only 18 years of age, she disavowed her heirship, received a small dowry from her family, and was ostracized from the royal house of Hanover. So they wanted nothing to do with her when she decided to marry this boy. Less than 2 years passed before her uncle William died and her sister Victoria was crowned queen. Just how long Mary and B.J. remained in England is a question, but a few years after their marriage, the decision was made to move to America. So this is where it all goes downhill. The family's tradition relates that B.J. left Mary with their several children and traveled to the United States to find a suitable home in their new country. What attracted Mr. Mortar to the hamlets of South Salem in the southern Ohio is yet another one of those questions in which family history and local folklore fail to answer today. But there is a good possibility that perhaps a relative or close friend who has already settled in this part of southern Ohio had written to Mary and B.J. about the land. So he went ahead, went to South Salem, bought a town in Lot. Why did they say Lot in town? I don't know. Within a stone's throw from the village large academy building next that had been erected only 8 years earlier, which that academy still stands today, but Mary Mortar's house is gone. He then contracted with local carpenters to erect a modern frame house suitable for his wife and children. Once their home was under construction, Mortar wrote Mary that she should leave for America and he would meet her in New York City. But sometimes plans go awry when you're writing and having it shipped across an ocean. BJ's family did not show up when he expected them to. When this occurred, he became startled and alarmed and he set sail for England. But Mary had received her husband's letter and had made the necessary preparations to leave her native land. It simply took longer than BJ expected it to take, so they kind of crossed each other. Mary and their 6 children were sailing west to America. Upon disembarking New York City and not finding her husband, almost penniless, Mary Mortar exhibited the courage and resourcefulness. During the several weeks, she and the children were forced to wait for BJ's return. Mary managed to find work to pay for their room and board, and she utilized her talents in making lace and crocheted skills, and had quite possibly learned as a young girl, being raised in such royal finery. So how did she learn this, right? When B.J. Mortar returned from England, the family had begun their arduous overland journey to Ohio. So, like I said, they were crossing each other over the ocean. So, upon arriving in South Salem, the Mortars discovered their house was still not complete. Some of the windows were not yet installed, and much of their fresh plaster Inside, the house was still wet, but having nowhere else to live, the family moved in and made the best of it. But the long trip across the sea, several weeks working in New York City, the rough inland travel to Ohio, and finally moving into what had to be a damp, drafty house proved to be too much for the 33-year-old mother of 6. Not long after moving to South Salem, Ohio, Mary developed a bad cold, and in her already weakened condition, she contracted tuberculosis. Living in an age where tuberculosis was poorly understood and medical techniques were primitive at best, the young wife and mother was ultimately doomed. The following spring, on April 16, 1852, Mary Morter died and was interred into the village cemetery within sight of her little home. She had surrendered her hope of becoming queen when she married a commoner, and when she constantly surrendered her life as she sought a happier existence for her family in a foreign land, far from Kingsland Palace in London. Skilled as a stonemason, B.J. Morter carved his wife's tombstone himself. It's a fairly small headstone with simple design, but however, close to the bottom of the sandstone tablet near the grass line, Morter carved an interesting one-word description. Think. Precisely what he wanted passerbys to contemplate after reading his inscription is not knowing perhaps he was hoping they would reflect on his noble wife's momentous decision, which changed her course from one luxury, power, and fame to one of obscurity, hardship, and much shortened lifespan. So that's awfully sad. I often visit Mary Morter's headstone in South Salem. I love that cemetery. It's so cute and small and peaceful, and it's just beautiful. Okay, this is the part of the show where I'm just going to do a couple of notable mentions in Ross County of haunted places. Alright, so we got Cross Key Taverns. A ghost named Harold haunts the tavern. He throws drinks and puts out lights. Any unusual occurrences are usually blamed on him. Grand View Cemetery. Shadow views and shadow figures have been seen strolling through the cemetery late at night. Strange mist have been captured, and some have felt as if they have been being watched. Huntington Hills. The hills of Huntington Township are said to be haunted. Many of the homes in the area are also said to be haunted, as well as the nearby church. So it sounds like Huntington Hills, haunted ass place. The Majestic Theater, also spelled Majestic Theater, like misspelled completely. It was used as a morgue for the hundreds of soldiers from nearby Camp Sherman who died during the Spanish flu epidemic. Embalmers worked day and night on stage, pumping the blood from the bodies into the adjacent alley, known to this day as Bloody Alley. Mysterious fogs drift around the building and screams have been heard. A man in a suit floats through the theater near the stage level. Voices have been heard when no one is around. A little girl has been seen running around in the dressing rooms before disappearing before the witnesses' eyes. A dead body was even seen on stage during a performance. Bloody Alley and the house next door to the theater, which has been demolished, are also said to be haunted. Old Western Cemetery. There was once a clicking tombstone at the cemetery. The cemetery is now gone, and in its place is Westmoreland Place. It is unsure if the tombstones were just relocated or the bodies too. So, Old Western Cemetery, you sound creepy. Schrader Road Tunnel. According to legend, a woman placed her infant on the railroad tracks and it was run over and killed by the train. It is said that if you drive through the tunnel at night with your lights off and windows down, you may hear the cries of the baby. Another version of the story states that the mother and her newborn were walking on the tracks above the train when a train came barreling toward them. The mother tossed the baby into the creek in an attempt to save its life, but both the mother and baby were killed. It is reported that you can also see the mother's ghost and hear the babies crying at night. The ghost of a woman who was murdered supposedly haunts the tunnel as well. Her body was discovered inside a waterbed mattress on the banks of Lick Run Creek at the north end of the tunnel. Many people have reported seeing her in the area. Cold spots and weird feelings can be felt in the tunnel, and several witnesses have reported seeing strange glowing red balls of light. Scioto Trail Park. The park is said to be haunted by the wife of the former ranger who lived on the property. It is said that she got drunk one night and only to return home and kill his wife. Okay. One version of the story states that he simply pushed her into the home's well, while another said that he shot her and dumped her body in the well. The well is in the little barn that no one can see from the road when going to the campgrounds. Alright, so Sugar Street House. Former residents of the home along South Sugar Street claim it is haunted. Doors and windows opened and closed on their own, and projects moved from the counters. An evil presence was felt by a couple lying in bed one night, immobilizing them for about 5 minutes until the presence departed. At least one person has reported seeing a ghostly woman with no legs wearing a white dress. Disembodied voices have been heard in several locations. Heavy footsteps have been heard in the attic, followed by a little girl crying. It is rumored that a man has killed his stepdaughter in the house and hid her body in the attic over the living room. So that is Sugar Street House. Westermoreland Place. On the former grounds of the old Western Cemetery, the former Chillicothe Hospital turned Rehabilitation Center may be haunted by those who were excavated from the graveyard. The cemetery was also the site of the clicking tombstone. Children who attended a nearby school refused to go near the grave marker due to the sound it made. Sulphur Lick Hotel in Frankfort. This hotel was abandoned, but it's not anymore. It is turned into a girls' home. And they have an opening July 5th, I do believe. So look up that on Facebook, but this is what the website says about. This abandoned hotel on Sulphur Lick Road is known to be haunted by many of the locals. The wife of the former owner found evidence that he had cheated on her, and she snapped and murdered him, along with each of the guests in their rooms. Blood stains were said to be visible for many years after the murders, and the ghosts of the murder victims are said to haunt the place. The hotel was abandoned and later sold with ambitions to become a bed and breakfast. The property is now under new ownership in 2009 and was remodeled to become a home for girls, which it is today. Alright, so those are some notable places that are haunted in Ross County. I will also be putting this website on the show notes. Okay, so this is the part of our show where I read your stories. I don't have any stories this month. Nobody emailed me, but I'm not going to give up on that. So, we're going to talk about my house ghost. I have a house ghost. Alright. We live in a house that is over 100 years old. And for 7 years, my husband has seen and heard a ghost moving through my computer room, walking up the stairs. Or, like a few weeks ago, he thought he had heard our 14-year-old come down the stairs, and seen what he thought was our 14-year-old shadow walking through the computer room. Thought it was him to the point where he followed the shadow to ask our 14-year-old a question, like, "What are you doing up?" But no one was there. He was so confused by this, he went upstairs to find our 14-year-old son asleep in his bed. I have seen it just one time, but it was just a shadow, like someone just came downstairs. And so I've been using my REM pod and my millimeter and my laser grid to try to catch this thing, because I'm going to want to catch some evidence of it and put it on YouTube or something. So I had the REM pod out one night, and it kept going off by the stairs. So I was ready for bed. I work second shift, so I'm up, pretty late. And when I go to bed is like the witching hour, and that's kind of when it was going off. So I took the REM pod upstairs to go to sleep with me. It didn't go off until daylight, like 7 a.m. It went off 3 times in a row, so I just assumed that she had walked upstairs and came towards the closet like she always does. Because I always hear, like, footsteps walking around my bedroom while I'm sleeping, and I think it's my dog. But now we no longer allow the pets in the bedroom because we're trying to grow bonsai trees, and I still hear it. And I think my dog or my cat broke into my bedroom, and there's nobody in the room. Now, so that brings me to what I think this thing could be. I think this ghost is not intelligent. I don't think that she even knows that she's there. I think she is a residual memory that keeps replaying. I think that time is not what we think it is. I think that the past, present, and future is all happening at the same time. So we are a ghost to her as she is a ghost to us. So that's my little house ghost story. So if you have your own spooky story that you want to share with the podcast, it doesn't even have to be a spooky story about ghosts. It could be about some weird encounters you had at the 7-Eleven on your way home from work. Send me spooky, weird, malicious, dark, humorous, any kind of story. I will read it on my podcast. And if you want an old-fashioned seance done, give me a call. I'm your gal. I use all of my high-tech new ghost equipment, and I use it during an old-fashioned seance. And the results are pretty wild. Also, if you'd like some free clout for Luna's Clout Corner, shoot me a message, and Luna and I will promote you on the show. So, in conclusion, this part of Ohio has some deep history, and I am glad that I am here to tell all the tales here on Under the Moon Paranormal Ohio Legends. Until next time, have a happy and safe Independence Day, and stay spooky, my friends. Thanks for listening. Make sure to join us under the next full moon for the next spooky tale of Under the Moon Ohio Paranormal Legends.